Give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, and he will get a fleet of fishing ships and deplete the ocean. Teach him agriculture, and he will cut down forests and clear lands to grow crops, taint the waterways with fertilizer runoff, and deplete the topsoil. See people starving and donate money, which ends up in administration costs. It sits in warehouses where starving people are convinced to vote for horrible dictators in exchange for food. Or it will end up partially in bribes to prop up terrible governments. Or massive commercial agriculture that depletes water supplies. So, what is the solution? Farming that does not impact the environment. Farming that produces its own water and in doing so produces clean, renewable power far more than is needed for the farming. A process which converts turbid, polluted or even salt water into energy and pure water. A square yard or metre of land requires 42 litres of water every 30 days. A closed-loop farming system requires 100 litres of water to propagate an acre of crops from seed to harvest. At LightSpeed BioTechnologies, we have come up with a climate-controlled farming method that can grow up to an acre of crops in 400 square feet, or 134 square metres. We have developed an algorithm which brings on the Emerson effect in plants. We can bring plants from seed to harvest in 25% less time, with greater crop production, with zero impact on the land and no runoff of fertilizer. It produces its own power, water, and even recycles its own waste to create a fertilizer. It is a smart system that can be monitored by tablet or smartphone. The farm we have developed is strong enough to be able to withstand a hurricane, but light enough to be mobile. It could be preloaded for disaster relief, so by the time first responders are running out of emergency food stocks, fresh crops could be delivered from farm units on site. It has an internal environment that has air so pure it would be good enough for a Class 1000 clean room. It is sealed, so no need for pesticides, herbicides or fungicides. It can be maintained in the hottest and coldest climates at a steady temperature required for optimum growing conditions. The structure could also be used as very mobile field hospitals, disease containment or mobile labs. Lightweight and modular, it could fulfill multiple civilian and military applications. There are commercial applications for restaurants, hotels and resorts, where food waste could be almost eliminated. Large hypermarkets could have them on the roof and have fresh produce year-round, so fresh the journey it takes is only walking. The CO2 savings from that alone make it environmentally friendly. Now imagine everyone producing far more power than they require. All the energy they use is carbon being absorbed by the plants grown. Every single farming unit is now a carbon sink, taking tons of carbon from the atmosphere every year. Well, imagine no more. It is now a reality. Our mission is to end world hunger and with it, world poverty.
Hi folks and welcome. I'm talking here to Richard Blanchett, who has invented probably one of the most groundbreaking developments in the field of farming and human sustenance that we've seen so far. Richard, tell us a little bit about this farm and why it's different to anything else that's currently out there.
It's completely self-sustaining. It produces its own water, produces its own power, produces so much excess power it could actually power a small village.
That's phenomenal.
It grows food in 25% less time than any other means.
Okay, so you could get to harvests 25% faster.
Say I based this around one of the first algorithms I wrote, which would be for tomatoes. Tomatoes take roughly 20 weeks from seed to harvest. Imagine doing that in 12.
Okay, so you could dramatically speed up the number of harvests per year and then increase the amount of food grown.
It's not just that. Because I'm interacting with very specific photoreceptors within the plant, I'm exciting those photoreceptors at the time when they need to be fed. We're also encouraging what is called the Emerson effect. Now, typically in nature this happens by chance, 1 in 20,000. And I've increased the odds of that happening to about 1 in 2. So the plant produces more food, more of the food. So say your typical plant would produce a tomato of 100, 150 grams. Now you're talking about a plant that produces a 300 to 400 gram tomato. Instead of producing 20 or 30 tomatoes to a plant, you're talking about a plant producing 60 to 80 tomatoes. So we're doubling the plant's production and reducing its harvest time.
So I believe that your system can not only create growth from far less water, but it actually creates water for the population around it.
It's just part of the process. One of the things that the power system that actually runs it is using a solar-powered fractal technology, which works best on turbid or seawater. And we create water from hydrogen, so it's the purest form of water there is. So communities where they have no access to clean water at all will produce far more water than the farm needs, because the farming needs roughly 150 liters per harvest, and it's going to be creating somewhere along the magnitude of around about 50 liters of water per day. So during the course of the harvest, we're producing so much clean water we don't know what to do with it. We'll have to. It'll just be excess to be used in the community and other places.
And I also understand that aside from just water, it will actually also produce electricity as well. So it's almost becomes a generator.
It is a generator. The whole system is set up to be completely self-sustaining. I was trying to think of this in sort of science fiction type terms. So it has to be able to produce enough water and to be self-sustaining enough that it can just sort of carry on its own. So it produces electricity, but say even the farm at full tilt is using maybe 10 kilowatts. All right, the amount of power that the farm actually produces is along the order of a megawatt. So each one is producing about a megawatt of power. It's 10 times the amount of power it actually consumes. It's producing 10 times the amount of water it actually consumes. So anything that it's not using can be used for the communities that it's in.
So this would have a huge impact for rural communities who are struggling to basically make crops grow in the soil which they've got, and also
no soil at all.
Yeah, and also places where you've got contaminated water, because I believe that this will actually clean the water as well. Won't it?
Yeah, because we're creating water from hydrogen, so there is no pure form of water. We need it that pure in the system because we're adding. We're only adding colloidal minerals, so we take very, very small doses of very specific minerals and we add them back into the water. We match the pH with very simple things like phosphoric acid, which can come from plant extracts. Actually, we can get some of our fertilizer from one of the other technologies that's bolted onto the system, where we put the food waste or the plant waste into it, and what it kicks out is, again, water, CO2, which feed back into the farm, power, just as an excess. It's a byproduct of the process, and it produces fertilizer. But it produces far more fertilizer than the farm needs. The farm needs milliliters of fertilizer per every harvest. But the system that we're using that bolts on the side will produce something like it could produce in the order of a liter of fertilizer a day as a byproduct of food waste. I kind of think of it like the Mr. Fusion in
Yes.
Back to the Future sort of thing. It's kind of like that, except we're not creating a nuclear fusion energy. We're just using this is an endothermic reaction. So,
how did you come up with this idea?
It was weird. It started from somebody asking me to help them solve a problem, and this led me to look at some of the work that was done by Carl Berlong, and he developed ways to manipulate wheat strains, which fed about 1 billion people. But I looked at some of his research, and then I went on and I actually looked at how photons interact with certain chloroplasts within plants. And then I started looking at it as a mathematical equation rather than as a genetic equation.
Right.
And so I thought, well, you know, if there's some sort of order to this chaos, and I can find it, then I can write an algorithm. And I did. And it's really long and extremely complicated. I didn't know exactly how to apply the algorithm, so I met with some people who saw where I was going with it, made it into a software program. So then I invented a device that the software could drive. And once I got there, I thought, well, what if we had to use this in a really hot climate? The hot climate would have an impact on the electronics and the devices inside. So I came up with a new cooling system to keep my system cool. But it was so revolutionary that it didn't involve any sort of CFCs. It's not gravity specific. It had to run on little, if any, power at all. It has to have some sort of input into it. So I think, well, how can I power my system and use, say, 100 milliwatt? Something, it could run off of a rechargeable battery for, say, 10 hours. So, which we could power with a small solar cell. So I thought about it from that aspect. And I finally came up with an engineering solution for it, which was the most efficient way to do it. And I thought, well, what if we encapsulated all of this in a larger structure? So I came up with a design for the structure to put it in. I didn't stop there. I thought, well, I wouldn't want to keep contaminants out, so I came up with a filtration system so that the air coming in is actually that of about a class 1000 clean room. So there's no need for pesticides, there's no need for herbicides, fungicides, any of those things, because the air coming in is absolutely pure. The water coming in is absolutely pure. So you get pure air and pure water coming in. You get pure crops being produced that don't require any sort of poisons or pesticides or waste runoff or anything. And everything in the system is recycled.
So that's going to have a huge impact in the third world where they're using, for instance, older grade pesticides like the old DDT, and then you've then basically got a toxic build-up within the food chain.
And you don't have the problem with stagnant water because it's a closed-loop system.
Now, I understand that the system is not only very simple to use, but it's also incredibly robust in terms of the very, very wide range of environments in which it can operate.
Yeah, well, I thought about this, because I thought, well, it's not just people who are in, say, the Danica Depression in Africa, where the daily temperature may be 55 degrees centigrade or about 130 degrees Fahrenheit. But there are also poor communities in places like northern Alaska, northern Canada, or northern Siberia. There are communities there where they have a very limited range of foods, and simply because it's too expensive to truck it in. It's too difficult to get it. It's very, very seasonal. And sometimes they only have access to roads if the roads are covered in ice. So I thought, well, it's got to be robust enough for them to use in that environment. Now, I've been there. I've been to the very north reaches of the world. And I know the storms there can be pretty hardy. So I had to think of a system that would be sustainable in an environment where, say, it was minus 40 with 100 kilometer an hour winds or 120 kilometer an hour winds. So I built it. It was lightweight, portable, sturdy enough to withstand a hurricane, but it should always be inside somewhere between 22 and 28 degrees C.
And so I understand that as well as obviously being something that you can put in place and kind of leave there to support the population around it, it also has use for disaster relief applications.
This came about from somebody who was talking about, there was an earthquake that happened, and if we could have these things sort of primed and ready to go, say all the plants are basically started, and by the time the emergency foodstuffs that have arrived on site have been exhausted, we can be able to harvest. And so, there's some crops that harvest very, very quickly. Legumes and things like that. So, your peas, your soybeans, you can actually bring them to harvest very, very quickly, 3 weeks. Now, if we had them already seeded and ready to go, when we put them in one of the systems, we can actually accelerate the growth pattern so that when it hits the ground, you set it up, set it to go. By the time the initial relief foods have worn out, you can actually give these people fresh produce on site. So for instances like Hurricane Katrina, where it was weeks before fresh food was being actually trucked back in, we could now have fresh food on the ground for them day 12.
So literally a farm just arrives on the back of a truck, it goes into production, and 3 weeks later
drop it off and there you go. But this also led me to think about the commercial applications for this. One of the biggest problems that stores have is food waste. It's the biggest expense any shopping, any major chain or hypermarket has. It's one of the biggest expenses they have. They have to deal with it. They have to throw it away. It's one of the things you pay for as a consumer. Well, if we had some of the really general food stocks just basically grown on the roof, well, we're producing more power than we need, so that could go into powering the lights inside the shop. That saves the store money. We're producing the food on site, so we're saving the trucking in CO2 to bring the food in. And it's not wasted because they go up and they harvest it daily. So they go up and harvest what they need for that day. What they don't need, they can put into the cube system, which will produce fertilizer and electricity and CO2 for the farm and clean water. And it's there, it's on site. So, you think about hotels, resorts, major supermarket chains. It's a huge, very huge profit possibility for them. But it also has military applications. So if you got somebody who's, I served in the military, I know what it's like to be in the field and eating out of ration packs for weeks at a time. Fresh produce, what's that? So I thought, well, these guys in the field, I mean, they do so much for us. Wouldn't it be nice if they didn't have stuff that came from a packet? Well, this is so portable and it's so ready to go that yes, if they've got someplace they're going to be for more than a couple of weeks or a couple of months, they could have fresh produce on site. How much better would it be for them, for their health in the long run?
So just to recap, what we basically have here is a system which grows crops far faster. The crops themselves are far richer. It uses far less water. It actually then produces fresh water for the environment around it. It produces electricity. It also produces fertilizer, and it's robust enough to withstand everything from the far north to the, kind of like the deserts of Africa.
Yeah, the solar shell that goes over the outside acts as a buffer. It'll act as a shade in a sunny condition. It'll act as a buffer in a cold condition. It also acts as a layer of protection to the outer skin of the farm. We've got a couple of different models. Obviously, we're working with some ISO certified models as well, because it'll take years to get things certified for the U.S. military. So we've got some ISO certified models that we can actually roll out to FEMA in weeks. But then we've got the conceptual ones, which they're just about ready for production now. And I actually want to test these in the hottest climate in the world and the coldest climate in the world, just to show that the technology actually does work.
So what's your plan for this? I mean, how are you going to develop this? How are you going to roll it out?
Well, we've had a lot of discussions with various different people. Like I said, there's the commercial application, and there's a lot of interest from the commercial side of it. And they say, you show it to us and we'll have one. There's the food securities ministers of several countries in the Middle East. Obviously, they're in an environment where it's very difficult to grow fresh food, and it's very expensive to grow fresh food with the current technology. You've got to think of it more of not like three-dimensional farming, but almost like four-dimensional farming. So you have to think of it in add a dimension, and you're getting there. So there's a lot of interest from them. We've had some meetings, we've had some discussions, and they're quite keen. But I think some of the early adopters will be the disaster relief. But the ultimate goal for us is we want to produce 10 commercially and set aside the money we make from the 10 commercial units. And for the next one we produce, we're going to give that away. We're going to give that away to some community where either water or food or both is just not an option.
So your commercial operation basically funds your ability to basically deploy these to the people who actually really need it and whom aid wouldn't normally reach. Or if it did, it's just a temporary handout that they then consume and it's gone.
The old adage, teach a man to fish, give a man to fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, and he'll deplete the oceans. So our idea is basically give these people the ability to be self-sustaining. But with the excess power that they have, we don't just want to give them a farm and see you, there you go. We want to educate them. So we want to roll out tablets and stuff so they can use the excess power to teach their children, so they can educate their children. Because I think that, I know for a fact, as a sociological experiment, that educated people are much less likely to conflict.
Yes.
So if we feed them and we educate them, chances are they won't want to fight. So, and today's charity is tomorrow's customer. There's going to be a point where we've given them to all the poor communities. There aren't any poor communities anymore. There's nobody left to give one to. But that's fine. So, we've done nice things, and we hope that one day they'll come back and they'll remember the guys that came out and gave them educational materials, and gave them a means to be self-sufficient, and gave them means to trade with other communities like themselves, and gave them their independence. And then they come back and they're our customers 30, 40 years down the road.
So this clearly has incredible applications in the short term, but I guess also in the long term, if you look at the way that we as a planet are trying to produce foods,
Inefficiently.
The fact that you then have plant diseases which are becoming far more resistant, and the fact that, to be honest, we're going to need to have more than one planet to sustain the population, especially the rate that it's growing. So not just in the short term, but also for long-term goals and even potentially for space exploration. I think I read it has, again, just long-term applications as well.
Well, because of the design I have, I've made it modular and adaptable, so it could be used not just for farm, but it could be used for like disease relief. So it like I said, the environment inside is like a class 1000 clean room. If needs be, it could be rolled out and set up and be used as a field hospital, as a surgical ward. I mean, you could perform surgery in there. It's clean. It's absolutely clean. The water you're washing with has been made from hydrogen, so I mean, there's nothing in it.
Yes.
You've got a clean environment clean enough to perform surgery in. But this also leads me back to I thought about adding certain adaptations to it to make it bee friendly. I mean, you still need to pollinate some of your crops, so we could have it so they're chained together, so bees can move from one farm unit to the next, and you can keep the hives in a separate unit, so they could come through, pollinate your crops, and go back, and then they wouldn't be subject to things like the varroa mite or the bee virus that's been wiping them out. So we could help them out in that same way. But we could also do this with other pollinators. And it would prevent them from bringing contamination in, so that the systems would still remain clean. Even though we're introducing a foreign body, we're introducing a clean foreign body. Bees are basically sterile. So we're introducing them into a clean environment that's safe for them.
Yes. So you're running this Kickstarter project, obviously, to basically help you get this idea off the ground. And I think that it's going to be something whereby if people are looking for a project that they want to invest in, and one that's going to have, probably one of the biggest impacts, both not only in short term for people who really need it, but also long term for humanity as a whole. This has got to be a choice that they'd be looking to make.
That's what we're hoping. I mean, this didn't happen overnight. I mean, the original R&D I did to develop the algorithm was coming back, and that took a good couple of years to come up with. The design for the system that the algorithm would drive, that took me another year to come up with, and then design, and then redesign, and then redesign, and then figure out the voltage exchanges and things like that. It wasn't a simple process. Yes, one led to the other, but it's taken us a long time to get to the point where we're on the verge of actually launching it. And like I said, if it does, well, no, not yet. When it takes off, because I don't think there's any stopping it now. It does have modular applications. We can add layers of protection to it, so it could be used on the moon. It could be used on Mars. It could be used to explore our solar system. It could be used to feed the people that explore our solar system, that colonize our solar system. It would be the first means for them to do so, and it's not dependent on weather on a foreign planet. It's just on whether or not they can catch a few rays from the sun. We know that they can do that because we've got space probes as far as Pluto. So managing to colonize the solar system, I'd love to say that it's because of me. My farm was the first farm on Mars. That would be great. But I'd like to tackle the problems at home first.
Yes.
And I mean, we've been putting a Band-Aid on problems for decades, and it's not getting anywhere. It just gets worse, or it gets better briefly. It gets better here. It gets worse there. I say we solve it. So fundamentally, it's an engineering solution to a social problem.
And I also understand that the altruism of this project is not just about what it's producing, but also how it's produced. Tell us a little bit about your plans for the workforce and the people that you're getting involved with this project.
Well, one of the companies we partnered up with in America, they're looking at doing the major production part of it for the commercial side. And one of the structures that we're doing, and they're producing it in a deprived zone. And so it's part of an area regeneration it's in Massachusetts. And so it's an area region, and this has to do with our American partnerships. That's already set up. That's their thing. We're happy to be working with them. We're happy to regenerate a part of America that's fallen on hard times. In this country, like I said, for every 10 commercial units that are being produced, we're going to produce one bespoke unit that's going to go out to some poor community someplace in the world where they don't have food and water.
Yeah.
That's going to be made here, right here in the UK. It's going to be right here in the UK. Now, I've been in discussions with the Legion and Help for Heroes for about 18 months. And they were quite keen to the idea, but I had to sit down and explain to them exactly how the structure was going to work. And basically, these units can be produced by disabled veterans. So if somebody's lost an eye, a leg, 2 legs, an arm, I don't see these people as being less capable of producing. I think that they'd be more driven to produce. And I want to give them something to produce they feel good about. Every day they get up and they come to work, and it's not just that we've given them something a job. It's not just a job, punch a clock. It's a job every day they know they're doing good in the world. So they've already done so much and given so much, and this is a way for us to give back to them. And I thought, well, I'd like to take on apprentices. So we'd open up, the only other opportunities, employment opportunities, would be open to young people from deprived backgrounds. And who better to learn from than veterans who have given so much? So it educates them. And they'll learn from these people who have dedicated their lives to the service of their country and given a lot in that process. But they'll learn work skills and life skills from them. So it's one leads to the other leads to the other. So I've discussed it with several people. I've discussed it with the Modern Apprenticeship Program. I've discussed it with, like I said, Help for Heroes and the Legion, and they're all behind it. They're all very much behind us producing our units, our farms that way. And I think everybody's pretty much on board. So, and I'm glad they like my vision. I'm glad they like to see where I'm going with it. And I've been very fortunate in being able to surround myself with an absolutely brilliant team. I mean, everybody that works on the project so far has been paid nothing, but worked very, very hard, invested a lot of their time. Quite a few of them have invested their own money to make sure that this has got off the ground, has got as far as it has. We have representatives in 16 countries who are willing to take this forward. To my team, I couldn't have done any of this without you. I mean, yeah, I came up with all the ideas, but you guys made it all happen, so credit where credit's due.
Fantastic. So if you had to sum up in one sentence what your mission is all about, what would it be?
End world hunger, and with that, end world poverty. Pretty simple.
Richard Blanchett, thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think if there was ever going to be one crowdfunding project this year that you get involved with, then both from the short term in terms of helping people who really need it, and the long term in terms of the future of our species, this has to be the project to pledge for. Thank you, and we look forward to your support.